So, when we talk about the Dingle Act, it was a great start to this whole aspect. But transparency remains difficult to track. Part of the issue is that the reporting and costs are very difficult to track, and these are likely some of the very issues. Now, this is what I was talking about earlier when I had a discussion with the ranking member. Ms. Lennox, to counter these claims that these radicals or some of these groups are funded by CCP, would you agree that the easiest and fastest solution would be for the environmental NGOs that receive any taxpayer funding in any shape or form to disclose their tax deductibility donations?
I certainly think that's one way to address the issue, Congressman Gosar, and I would just agree with you. The lack of transparency is a significant issue. We saw EJA awards that we know were awarded not to Safari Club, but to other groups that didn't appear in the database.
Well, I bring this up because I have a bill to put in the Trust and Transparency Act that does just that. Now, the Safari Club International is a great example of where conservation meets the multiple use needs of their lands. You're actually responsible for increasing populations around the world, are you not?
Certainly, hunting is one of the most significant protectors of habitat, and when you secure habitat, you see significant increases in species. Hunting also generates significant funding that then also helps prevent poaching, ensure communities are invested in wildlife conservation, all of those things that help increase populations.
So this is really lawfare against multiple use doctrine of FLIPMA.
Certainly, we would agree with that, Congressman, and we would say in the cases that we deal with, there aren't payments being made to the plaintiff. What we're seeing is lawsuits that stop things like the delisting of species, or lawsuits that challenge decisions by the agencies and reverse them. But those were science-based decisions that now are preventing things like responsible management of certain species like wolves and grizzly bears. And that's a significant problem that's not, the attorney's fees there are also coming from the the taxpayer dollars and the agency appropriations, and not from any sort of award that's being made.
Gotcha. Mr. Joseph, the other side of the aisle loves to talk about not giving federal agencies enough funding. We just heard about it, but not about the funding wasted on frivolous lawsuits. Time is money, right?
Time is money. These awards oftentimes come from agency budgets, and I would direct you to my written testimony where Region 1 of the Forest Service actually had to articulate and point out the cost to individual national forests of these EJA awards.
So describe a little bit better for everybody how these lawsuits will actually drain the agency's resources.
Because lawsuits are incredibly expensive.
And time.
Right? I mean, it takes a lot of time. Again, referring you to my written report and the Breakthrough Institute report, litigation and EJA, which helps fuel litigation, oftentimes leads to an additional 3.7 years of environmental analysis for a forest management project. 3.7 years is added to the process just because of the challenges, and they're not leading to different results or outcomes on the ground.
Well, I can agree, but 3+ years is a very insignificant amount when you compare it to some of these mining claims that are over 30 years old and trying to get something where they have never produced a penny of copper. So tracking these NGOs, I think my bill, we actually are putting this bill together, and we found out that the IRS actually tracks it, okay, above a certain numeration of dollars. But I'm not entitled to see it. Do you find that very contradictory?
No.
So let me ask you a question. So oversight, you can't do oversight properly unless you're following the dollars, right? So I'm gonna bring up something very different. Are you familiar with the PTAB board?
I'm not.
Okay, when I came here, it's about patents. So we went from, our constitutional amendment basically said that the discoverer gets this passed, because we're gonna protect him, the small guy. Well, then we were told that we got this problem with this patent process, so we go to the PTAB. So we go from first to discover to first to file. Guess what happened? No more patent problems, because all these big first to file people have all these tons of insurers, lawyers, and the little guy can't stay in. You just can't stay in. So there's something to this. Now, in my bill, I actually say, listen, if you get a penny from the federal government, you should have to report where you got all the rest of your dollars. Number two is if you get a foreign donation, you should have to report that. Do you agree, Ms. Lennox?
We can agree with that.
How about you, Mr. Wilkerson?
Yes, Congressman.
How about you, Mr. Rolfe? I mean, Mr. Joseph?
Yes, sir. I fully support transparency.
Professor, why wouldn't that be something that is allotted?
Pardon me, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure I understood the question.
Well, the question was that if a donation is given from a foreign entity, a foreign, say, country, and then federal dollars are spent in that case, and they're being spent here, why would transparency be a bad word?
Transparency,
You're following the dollars, and you're asking us to do proper oversight, so we got to follow the dollars.
so you're going to ask who pays what lawyers? You're going to inquire into all the finances of any litigant in federal court? It sounds like a fishing expedition to me.
Well, that's where you and I disagree, because I think if you don't take a federal dollar, we have no business unless there's some justification for a warrant. But once you take a federal dollar, that's my jurisdiction, and I got to follow it. So I spent the better part of this morning discussing with the Republicans, we need to bring big insurers in front of Congress. So we have accountability for all the dollars, the $4.5 to $7.3 trillion were spent during COVID. So accountability is everything. Now I go back. My last question to each one of you is each one of you, what was the question you most wanted to have asked, and what's the answer? Ms. Lennox, let's start with you.
That's a great question, and I wish I'd prepared an answer to that faster. But certainly, I think the question, I'd like to continue on the transparency point. One of the things we suggest is that courts and agencies have to do a better job of reporting who receives EJA funds. And so a question I would have liked is, well, how would that work? Well, it wouldn't be that difficult to create some sort of reporting form that a law clerk could easily type in, here's the EJA awards that we made, and then we would see a much greater or much more accurate and consistent reporting of who's actually receiving EJA awards and what those amounts are for.
Were you surprised when I told you that the IRS already does this and I can't see it? It surprised me too. Okay, Mr. Wilkerson, you're up.
Congressman, the question I would have liked to have heard asked is, why do environmental NGOs get a pass? Why are they exempt from the rules that the rest of us operate under? You know, I heard that 24 million is a drop in the bucket. Well, where I come from in South Dakota, 24 million is real dollars. And the issue isn't the amount necessarily that's awarded. That's just the tip of the spear. It's all of the money that's spent fighting these lawsuits that maybe don't even get an award. So I just don't understand why environmental NGOs that are classified as 501c3 can hire these law firms and they can get awards and they're exempt when the rest of us have to play by the same rules.
Good. Professor Rolfe?
I guess I would like to have been asked by this committee, why hasn't this committee totaled up the total cost of all the high-priced lawyers when we're talking about environmental disputes in general involving the federal government? Why hasn't this committee looked at the total lawyers that represent industry and those that have environmental impacts? Armies and armies of very high-priced lawyers that are paid very well by industry, and compared that against the attorneys who represent the public's interest in protecting and managing the environment. And let's put that on a scale, and you'll find that even the largest environmental group that represents the public interest, Earth Justice, is a very, very modest in comparison.
So playing
I'd love to have the committee ask me about that.
Well, my question would back to you would be, you brought up the comment of a cost to paying attorneys. If you didn't like it so much, why don't you go back and amend it? So it sounds like to me that opening up this EJA would benefit that, would it not, for your side?
Opening up EJA? Sure, because we should modify the attorney fee rate that was set in 1996 and make that more modern. And look at something like Ms. Lennox's fees that she charged as a private attorney in New York City and maybe make the rates a little closer to that.
Well, there's a little difference between you and Ms. Lennox. You're a public company. Your public attorneys are working on behalf of the American people. Hers are private. So actually, there's a little bit of difference there. Mr. Rolfe, now, or Mr. Lewis, or yeah, Mr. Rolfe, you're up. No, Mr. Lewis, sorry. Joseph Lewis. Mr. Joseph, you're up.
I wish someone would ask me what the greatest risk to public lands is. And my answer to that would be EJA is a part of litigation, is a part of NEPA, NIFMA, FLIPMA, APA, all of these statutes and well-meaning laws are critical. They were passed in the 60s and 70s and 80s. They were tackling 20th century issues. We're in the 21st century. So if you care about forest health and resiliency, you care about smoke in the air that is killing Americans, 50,000 Americans every single year. If you care about wildlife habitat and clean water and clean air, we have built a management paradigm of our public lands that's based on 20th century concepts. It has not been updated by science, by common sense, and we need to take a holistic approach of the systems that currently are not allowing us to manage this extraordinary heritage of the United States of America of public lands. We need active management, we need active conservation, and our current laws and regulations are failing us, and they're not allowing us to do that.
So to your secondary question, so if it's an agency that's underfunded, why can't private sector do this stuff?
Public-private partnerships are going to be the future of federal land management.
I appreciate it. I live out in the forest. When I had to have the Forest Service come in and talk about defensible spaces on my property, yeah, that's where we've got to make this happen. Last but not least, to you again, if we made the American people the recipients of public lands, some of the money coming off public lands, do you think we would use it a little bit better than some of these agencies would do and some of these NGOs would be fighting against?
Can you restate that question?
Yeah,
I'm
so
sorry.
I have a bill. It's called the Lasso Act. It takes 10% of all the proceeds coming off of public lands, puts it in the Social Security Trust Fund. That now is worth $2 to $4 billion. But somebody's going to look at it and say, you know, if we do this right, we can make a bunch more money, and we can have the people's interest in keep it out of harm's way. Could that be something you could support?
I think that while the American public, including myself, have extraordinary love of our public lands and our industry supports public lands being publicly owned, I also think that there's a disconnect about the public's appreciation or understanding of the economic and socioeconomic contributions of public lands and natural resources to the United States of America. And so if you're able to somehow connect financially those benefits that return to the American public, I think you would activate millions of people that are not currently engaged in this space.
See, I love the comment, because that's what I'm thinking exactly, because you have failing programs, and if you engage those people, they will care. So I appreciate it. Now,